I watched him place the ring on her finger, my best friend's finger. And the worst part was he was looking at me the entire time. Not her, me, like he was waiting for me to stop it. Like he wanted me to say something, do something, feel something out loud. But I just smiled, because that's what I do. I smile when I'm bleeding on the inside. I had no idea that ring wasn't a beginning. It was a confession. And I had no idea that everything I thought I had lost was actually waiting for me to finally stop being afraid of it. Welcome to Afro-Korean Chronicles. Please like, share, and subscribe. His name was Jiwon. Park Jiwon. Senior cardiologist at Seoul National Hospital and the most emotionally complicated man I have ever loved in my entire life. We met 3 years ago when I moved to Seoul for my architecture internship. I was 26 years old, completely lost, armed with nothing but a translation app and the dangerous belief that I could build a whole new life in a country where I barely spoke the language. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know the streets. I didn't even know how to order food without pointing at pictures on the menu like a child. But I had my work and I had my ambition, and I told myself that would be enough. It wasn't, but that's a different story. He was the one who helped me when I collapsed at the subway station one evening after a long shift. Low blood pressure, too much work and not enough food, which was basically the summary of my entire life at that point. Classic me. He knelt beside me on that cold station floor in his pressed white coat, not because it was his job right then since he was off duty, but because he said later, "You looked like you were trying to disappear and no one was noticing." I remember lying there on that floor looking up at him and thinking, who says something like that to a stranger? Who even notices something like that? I thought that was the most beautiful and terrifying thing anyone had ever said to me. That was the beginning of everything. For 2 years after that, we were something I don't have a clean word for. Not officially dating, not just friends either. Something in that aching middle space, where every conversation felt like holding your breath underwater, and every goodbye felt about 2 seconds too long. He would call me at midnight just to ask if I had eaten. Not to talk about anything important, just that. "Did you eat today, Zara?" And somehow that small question every night made me feel more seen than anything anyone had ever done for me with grand gestures and expensive gifts. He kept my favorite black tea in his apartment even though he only drinks coffee and has never once touched tea in his life. He learned how to say "you look tired," rest in my mother's language, Yoruba, because he said he wanted me to hear care in the language I dreamed in. Not the language I worked in or performed in, but the one that lived deepest inside me. And I fell. Quietly. Completely. The way you fall when you don't realize it's happening until you're already at the bottom and looking up and thinking, oh no, this already happened. Then came Amara, my best friend, my person. The woman who had known me for 11 years, who video called me every single Sunday without fail, who knew every embarrassing story about me, including the ones I had tried to erase from my memory, who flew all the way to Seoul for my 27th birthday just to surprise me with a cake and her ridiculous laugh that fills every room she walks into. I loved her completely. I trusted her completely. I introduced her and Jiwon at my birthday dinner that year, thinking nothing of it, except that they were both people I loved, and it would be nice for them to meet. I remember sitting between them at that table, feeling genuinely happy, thinking, look at this. Look at all these people I love in one place. I had no idea I was handing her the match while standing in a room full of everything that mattered to me. I had no idea that dinner would be the last time the three of us were in the same room and everything was still whole. 3 months after that birthday dinner, Jiwon stopped calling at midnight. I told myself he was busy. New hospital rotation, high-profile cases. Doctors get busy, that's just the life. Then Amara stopped answering my Sunday calls, not all at once. Gradually. The calls got shorter. Then they started going to voicemail. Then whole Sundays passed in silence. I told myself she was going through something because life gets full sometimes and people pull inward. I believed my own excuses because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to look at. And then one evening my phone lit up on the kitchen counter while I was making dinner. A notification. A photo. Jiwon and Amara together at the Han River. Golden hour light, her head resting on his shoulder. His hand visible near hers, tagged with the words, "Found my person." I stood in my kitchen holding that phone for 47 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the wall the entire time. The food on the stove went cold. The city outside my window kept moving, kept living, completely unbothered. I kept waiting to feel something clean and simple like anger or betrayal or the kind of tears that come fast and loud and get it over with. Instead, I felt this terrible, quiet hollowness. Like someone had reached into my chest while I wasn't looking and removed something weight-bearing. And I was still standing, but only technically. My body was upright, but something structural was gone. I called Amara. She picked up on the first ring, which she hadn't done in weeks, which told me she had been waiting for this call. I was going to tell you, she said before I could get a single word out. When I asked, I didn't know how, she said. Amara, I said, and I put everything into just her name, all the confusion and the hurt and the 11 years of us. I know, she said. But Zara, it just happened and he makes me feel. I stopped her there. Did he tell you about us, I asked. There was a silence that lasted just long enough to tell me everything. There was no us, Zara, she said finally. You said that yourself. And the terrible thing, the thing that sat in my chest like a stone, was that she was right. I had said exactly that. 6 months before that phone call, she had asked me directly, sat me down with that serious face she uses when she means business, and asked me straight out if I had feelings for Jiwon. And I had said no. I had looked her in the eye and said no, there is nothing there, because saying yes felt like reaching for something I was terrified I didn't deserve. So she wasn't wrong to believe me. She had asked me directly, and I had lied to her face, and she had believed the lie because she loved me and trusted me and had no reason not to. But she was wrong to not look closer. Some truths live just beneath the surface of what people say, and the people who love us are supposed to see them even when we can't say them out loud. I hung up and sat down on my apartment floor because my legs had simply stopped cooperating. I sat there for a long time with my back against the couch. My tea went cold on the table. The city outside kept moving, indifferent and enormous. And slowly, sitting there on that floor, I understood something that hurt worse than the betrayal itself. I had lost 2 people in one phone call, and the person most responsible for that loss was me. 4 months passed after that. I threw myself into work the way people throw themselves into water when they are running from fire, completely and with no plan for what comes next. I took on every extra project my firm offered. I redesigned my entire daily route to avoid the places Jiwon and I used to go together, the coffee shop near the hospital, the bookstore on the corner, the little soup place that stayed open late. I rerouted my entire life around the shape of their absence. I told myself I was healing. I told myself I was moving forward. I was doing fine. I was absolutely fine, until the hospital gala. My firm had been commissioned to redesign the East Wing of Seoul National Hospital, a full renovation covering 6 floors. It was the biggest project I had ever been assigned, and the project kickoff was scheduled at a formal gala dinner hosted by the hospital's board of directors. I could not miss it. I got dressed in my apartment that evening, looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, told myself it was just work. It was just one evening, and walked in looking like I had not spent 4 months trying to forget that building existed. He was there within the first 3 minutes of my arrival. Of course he was. Park Jiwon. Black suit, perfectly fitted. Glass of water in his hand because he never drinks at professional events. And that expression on his face, the one I had spent 2 years studying when he thought no one was watching, that quiet, controlled expression that sat on the surface of him like still water over something deep and moving. He saw me before I saw him. I could tell because when I finally looked up, he was already completely still. Not moving toward me, not moving away. Just still, the way a person goes still when they are trying to decide something very quickly. Zara, he said when I reached the edge of the room. That voice that used to say my name like it was something worth being careful with, something that could break if handled wrong. Dr. Park, I said. He flinched, just slightly, just for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. You look well, he said. I am well, I said. Are you, he asked, and there was something in the way he asked it that made it not a pleasantry. I picked up a glass from a passing tray just to have something to do with my hands. This isn't the place, I said. I've been trying to reach you, he said. I know, I said. You blocked me, he said. I know that too, I said. He stepped closer. Not in the way that demands space or attention, in the way that asks permission. Can we talk, he said. Not here, after this. There's nothing to talk about, Jiwon, I said. I think there is, he said. You have a girlfriend, I said. The words came out cleaner than I had intended, more final than I felt. Something moved across his face then, something layered and complicated that I didn't have time to read. It's more complex than he started. It always is, I said. Congratulations on the relationship. Excuse me. And I walked away, 14 feet. That's exactly how far I got before my project director appeared and introduced me to the hospital's designated liaison for the renovation project, Park Jiwon. Of course it was Park Jiwon. Because my life had apparently decided that enough was simply not enough. The next 6 weeks we worked together in the same conference room, at the same table, over the same floor plans. The same careful professional distance that neither of us was anywhere near as good at maintaining as we pretended to be. He was meticulous in that way he had always been, thoughtful in ways that showed up quietly rather than loudly. I mentioned once in passing that the elderly cardiac patients would need shorter walking distances from the elevator to the cardiology ward. 3 days later, he sent me a detailed structural note that accounted for exactly that, cross-referenced with patient mobility data he had pulled from his own department records. That was the thing about Jiwon. He listened like your words cost him something. Like they landed somewhere real inside him, and he stored them carefully and brought them back out when they mattered. That was the most dangerous thing about being near him again. He was still exactly who he had always been. We had a real disagreement in week 3 over the placement of the family waiting area. He wanted it directly adjacent to the surgical ward so families could feel close to their loved ones during procedures. I wanted it in a separate wing, a buffer space, somewhere families could breathe and fall apart privately without the weight of the surgical doors 10 feet away. Families in crisis need containment, he said. They need to feel close to what's happening. They need to breathe, I said. Close doesn't always mean safe. Sometimes close is the most suffocating place to be. He went quiet for a moment after I said that. Then he looked at me, not at the blueprints, at me. You're right, he said quietly. I know that better than most. And we both understood that we were no longer talking about waiting rooms. Amara called me in week 4. I almost didn't answer. I sat watching her name on my screen through 3 full rings. But something in me, the part that still loved her and still remembered 11 years of friendship that existed before any of this pain, picked up. I miss you, she said. I know, I said. Can I explain properly, she asked. You don't have to, I said. Zara, please, she said. So I said talk, and I sat down and I listened. She told me everything from the beginning. How she had come to visit me and I was stuck at work late and she went to the cafe near my apartment alone. How Jiwon had happened to be there. How they had ended up talking for nearly 3 hours. And then she said the thing that rearranged everything. He talked about you the entire time, she said. That whole first conversation. Your work. The way you describe buildings as emotional spaces. The way you see the feeling a room is supposed to hold before you design it. He talked about you like you were something he was still trying to understand and couldn't stop thinking about. Zara, he was in love with you. I could hear it in everything he said. I didn't breathe. Then why, I started. Because I asked him, she said. A few weeks after that cafe, I asked him directly why he had never told you how he felt. And he said you didn't want that. That you had told me there was nothing there and he wasn't going to pressure you into something you had already decided you didn't want. The room tilted slowly under me. So you and him, I started again. It was a mistake, she said, and her voice was quiet and honest in the way it gets when she is telling the full truth. We both knew it within 2 months. We are not together anymore, Zara. We haven't been for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Since the night of the gala. Since he walked across that room toward me like a man who had been waiting in one place for a very long time. Why didn't anyone tell me, I asked. Because you stopped answering, she said simply. And I had nothing to say to that because it was completely true. I hung up the phone and sat with the shape of my own mistake for a long time. I had told her there was nothing there. He had believed me. They had both built something on the foundation of what I said because I had been too afraid to say what I actually meant. I had made myself small to avoid the possibility of rejection, and then watched 2 people I loved try to make sense of the space I left. I had lost 2 people not because of betrayal, but because of my own silence. That was the hardest thing I have ever had to sit with. The next morning, Jiwon arrived at the project office before me. He was standing at the window when I walked in, Seoul spread out behind him in that gray and gold morning light the city does so beautifully. He turned when he heard the door. We looked at each other for a moment without speaking. Amara called me, I said. Something in him settled then, or maybe braced. I couldn't tell which yet. She told me everything, I said. Zara, he started. You talked about me, I said. That whole first conversation. You were already in love with me. He was quiet for a moment, looking at me steadily. Yes, he said. I am, he said, present tense. Not was, am. I felt the ground shift under me in the slow, certain way of something that has already been true for a long time finally being said out loud. Then why didn't you just tell me, I asked. You told her there was nothing there, he said. I was scared, I said. So was I, he said. Then we were both idiots, I said. His mouth curved just slightly, that almost smile he kept so close. Yes, he said. We were both idiots, but it was not that simple and we both knew it. Because the next day I came into the office and he was on a phone call and I heard a name I recognized. Soyeon, the hospital board's chair. Polished and Korean and someone I had noticed watching Jiwon at the gala with an expression I recognized intimately because I had worn it myself for 2 years. He ended the call the moment he saw me. That was nothing, he said immediately. I didn't ask, I said. But you want to, he said. Jiwon, I started. She is a colleague, he said. 4 years, nothing more, nothing has ever happened. You don't owe me explanations, I said. I want to give them to you, he said, and his voice dropped into that register it had when he was being completely serious. That's the difference between before and now. I want to give them. I looked at him then. Really looked. I don't know how to do this, I admitted out loud for the first time. I don't know how to trust that what I feel is real and not just longing left over from something that never got a proper ending. What did you think we were? He asked softly. Everything, I said. The word fell out of me before I could measure it or pull it back. He crossed the room slowly, deliberately, the way he did everything that mattered to him. Then let me tell you what I know, he said. I know I kept your tea in my apartment for a full year after everything fell apart, because every time I thought about removing it, I simply could not do it. I know I learned 11 words in Yoruba, and I still practice them even now, even after months of not seeing you, because they felt like a way of staying close to something I wasn't ready to let go of. I know that when you walked into that gala, my body went completely still because some part of me had been waiting for that moment without admitting it. That's not, I started. I'm not finished, he said, and I stopped. I know I made the wrong choice, he continued. Not in the situation with Amara because we both recognized that mistake quickly and honestly. The wrong choice was believing your silence. I should have stood in front of you and said, Zara, I need to know the truth because I cannot keep carrying this feeling alone and pretending it isn't there. Why didn't you? I asked. Because I was afraid you would confirm what you had already said, he told me. And I was not ready for that to be the truth. We stood in that early morning light surrounded by floor plans and the careful architecture of spaces designed for other people's lives. You never asked me what I actually felt, I said. I know, he said. You assumed my silence meant no, I said. Yes, he said. That wasn't fair, I said. No, he said. It wasn't. And I lied, I said, and the words hurt coming out in a way I hadn't expected. When Amara asked me directly, I lied because I was afraid of wanting something I might not be allowed to have. I made myself small so there was nothing large enough to reject. And then I blamed you both for believing the version of me I deliberately put in front of you. He said nothing. He simply let that truth exist in the room without rushing to cover it or fix it. That was so completely him, always making space for the hard thing to breathe before trying to resolve it. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry too, he said. Where does that leave us, I asked. He looked at me for a long, quiet moment. Somewhere honest, he said. For the very first time. We did not fall back into each other that day because that is not how real love works, at least not the kind that is worth anything. We kept working together, but something essential had shifted. The performance of distance was gone. We talked like two people who had finally agreed to stop pretending. He asked me about my mother for the first time, really asked, and I told him about Lagos. The heat that sits on you like a second skin. The noise that never fully stops even at 3 in the morning. The way the city feels alive in a manner that overwhelms you and holds you at the same time, like being loved by something too big to fully understand. He listened without interrupting once, which is rarer than most people realize. I asked him about the moment he knew he wanted to spend his life as a cardiologist. My grandmother, he said. Her heart failed twice before I was 12 years old, and both times she came back. And I remember thinking that whoever was responsible for bringing her back was who I wanted to be when I grew up. You wanted to give people back to each other, I said softly. Yes, he said. That is exactly it. That's who you are, I said, even outside that hospital. He looked at me with that expression I had spent years trying to read correctly. I finally understood it that morning. It was longing that had learned to be patient. 3 weeks later, Amara and I met for coffee. It was awkward for exactly the first 7 minutes, and then it was us again, imperfect, complicated, real. She cried. I cried. We said the hard things. We said I should have an I'm sorry until the words were worn smooth. She told me she hoped Jiwon and I found our way. I want that for you, she said. I always wanted it. I just got confused about my own loneliness for a while. So did I said. We ordered more coffee and stayed until the cafe closed. Friendship, like love, is not always a straight line. Sometimes it loops and dips and terrifies you. But if it's real, it finds its way back. The night the renovation design was approved, all 6 floors, every waiting room, every corridor designed around the emotional reality of the human beings who would walk through them, Jiwon and I stood outside the hospital. The city was loud and glittering and completely indifferent to the fact that something important was happening right there on that sidewalk. You designed something beautiful, he said. We collaborated, I said. You saw it first, he said. I smiled. Actually smiled, not the performance smile, but the real one. He turned to face me fully. I want to ask you something, he said. Okay, I said. Not as a colleague, he said. Not as someone you used to almost be with. As the person who wants to keep learning Yoruba until he can have a whole conversation in it. As the person who will always make sure there's black tea. As the person who has been waiting badly, clumsily, with too much silence and not enough courage for the chance to do this right. He reached into his coat pocket. Not a grand gesture. Not a theatrical moment. A small box. Simple. Like him. I'm not asking you to forget everything that happened, he said. I'm asking you to let this be the real beginning. The honest one. The one where I actually say out loud what I feel instead of hoping you'll somehow know. I looked at the ring. I looked at him. I thought about the subway station and the midnight calls and the black tea and the 11 Yoruba words and the floor plans and the waiting room argument where neither of us was talking about the waiting room. I thought about how love, real love, isn't always the grand gesture. Sometimes it's the person who stores your tea and learns your language and waits, imperfectly, clumsily, with too much fear and not enough words, and then one day finally finds them. Yes, I said, not loudly, but completely. He put the ring on my finger. And this time, unlike that first time I watched from across a room bleeding quietly in a crowd, this time he was only looking at me. Not like he was waiting for me to stop something, like he was terrified I might, and I didn't. Seoul kept moving around us, the city indifferent and enormous and alive. And right there on that sidewalk I stopped running from the thing I'd wanted longer than I'd been willing to admit. I had lost 2 people to my own silence and found them both again by finally speaking. That's the thing about truth. It's terrifying right up until the moment it sets you free. And then it feels like the only thing that was ever real. This was my story. The whole messy, honest, beautiful shape of it. Thank you for staying until the end chronicles. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Afro-Korea Chronicles. And whatever love you've been too afraid to say out loud, maybe today is the day.